Hi, welcome back to the Recruitment and Beyond podcast. We are joined today by Fiona McKee, the founder of the HR practice. Fiona, great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Ewan. So I'm the founder of the HR practice. It's an HR consultancy for SME and entrepreneurial businesses, and we look after lots of companies throughout Scotland and the UK.
Brilliant. So I think today we wanted to talk about just why well-being still matters. So, becoming and developing a human-centered workplace in 2025, and why it's still important to really focus on your staff and their well-being. And it's not just necessarily about when they're in the workplace, it's the whole person. Why is well-being still a major issue in 2025? Surely we all know about it and we're all doing something about it these days. Why is it still a major issue?
So I think the problem is that we see a lot of initiatives happening, right? So maybe HR teams or management teams thinking, we should do some initiatives. People may be a bit stressed at work. Wellbeing days, mental health awareness, which are absolutely important. But we're not really dealing with the root cause, which is often job design. So, we've hearing about lots of cuts in headcounts, and then people are getting more to do, result in being overworked and overwhelmed almost. So I think, we need to actually go back to what is the root problem. And I think that's coupled with a lack of management training for new managers. And they're also overworked, so it's really hard. And that can just results in burnout for a lot of people. But I think the key to all of this is the job design, right?
Right. So that's interesting actually you mentioned that, and this wasn't in our list of questions, but you talked about people not being necessarily ready and management training. And do you think that's sometimes that people, they get promoted into a role and it involves people management and they just don't have necessarily the skills or the training to be able to deliver that? Do you think that's a part of the root cause that you talk about?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's an age-old problem with, we promote people that are really good at their jobs, that think they'd be really good manager, that's the natural route for them, and then we don't invest in the training, and managers are then left with a title and a lot of responsibility, not entirely sure, so they're not trying to break things or say the wrong thing, but they're using their best endeavours without having some proper skills and training behind them, and it's very tricky. And I think especially round about pressure and wellbeing initiatives, where I think everyone's quite scared as well to say the wrong thing. So I think that all of that in the mix certainly doesn't help matters.
So I guess that leads us on then to what are the biggest misconceptions that businesses have about well-being and mental health at work? What are the things that you see that people just get the wrong idea about?
I think, a lot of businesses, I think we're expecting a lot more out of employees. I think, it's often seen as, of well-being, they've just not got the resilience, and it's almost blamed on the employee. So, I didn't think they were very resilient, or, stress, that's more of a weakness, and it's absolutely not. And I think, it's back to this, like, is that job design correct? Is it sustainable? Have we got enough support in place? And it's a big undertaking to do that. So of course, everyone's running, trying to catch up. And I think, the misconceptions are that, well, maybe the person's weak, or why don't we just give them more benefits, right? So what if we have a yoga session in the office, or maybe we offer gym memberships? Maybe that would help address the issue, but it doesn't solve unreasonable workloads or long hours or poor management, any of that. And I think, added to that, we'll often ask in engagement surveys, well, let's ask a question about well-being, we'll see how everyone is. But actually, you need to do something with the result when you get it. And the next wellbeing day or fruit in the office or gym memberships, it's just not going to cut it. And I think, we really need to step back and understand what is the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that leads on nicely to the next question, which is very much around those perks. And I think for a lot of people, leaders perhaps think that it's about benefits or perks, or like you say, fruit in the office or whatever it might be. But what is a human-centered workplace? What does it actually look like? Can you give us an example?
I think a human-centered workplace would be having clear expectations on what is expected of you, consistent leadership.
Right.
And I say often, listen, I would rather everyone, if you had to be, would be consistently bad. Right, consistently bad, I should say, rather than inconsistent, because inconsistent is just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I want everything to be consistently good, obviously, but you'd be better being consistently bad than inconsistent. So I think you need to be clear, you need to be fair, and have flexibility and autonomy. And I don't mean just let everyone work at home 5 days a week. If that's not your model, that's absolutely fine. But flexibility around about maybe taking breaks, because more often than not now, people don't even get a lunch break. So or don't know they get a lunch break, but they don't take it. Feeling as well that you're safe to raise concerns. So if you've got concerns about your workload or the intensity, long hours, that you feel you can actually speak up about it, because mental health even today is still something that people are afraid to speak about. So I think knocking down some of those barriers would really help a lot. And as I said, I really think we need to get the work design right, and make sure that we do have processes in place and that people can raise concerns if they have them, and it's not something that you just got to go on with it, or you're deemed as weak if you mention stress.
Does this hark back, I suppose, to culture to a certain degree, in that you mentioned there some people either don't know they have a lunch break or have a lunch break and don't take it because other people in the organisation don't take it either? Is that part of what comes from leadership, is creating a culture where well-being is seen as important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there is that presenteeism, a lot of time for lunch breaks around here, or because everyone will probably get a lunch break, just don't have time to take it, or you feel that under pressure that actually taking a lunch break you feel set you back, but actually going out for a walk for half an hour or 10 minutes even in the day is probably a good reset, and you'd refresh and you'd be able to start again. But it's in your head perhaps seen as like, I don't have time. If I go and do that, I could have got this, that and the next done. So I think it's a balance of people putting themselves under a level of pressure, and also managers overloading people with work to do. So we're always on, we're always checking their phones, or and I think back to the days of Blackberries and the wee light would flash away. Better go check that, see what that is. But it's just become the norm now. Everyone's phones from work, so you're going about 2 phones potentially, and you're always on. In fact, you see quite a lot now people saying, I don't expect you to reply because I'm sending the mail out of hours, you don't have to reply. I think you probably feel you do.
But again, that is a cultural thing, isn't it? It's we spoke to someone before who talked a lot about that. Is to say, look, I'm not expecting you. And I think that culture needs to be set from the top, so then it goes down into your management teams who can make sure people are doing that. I suppose to a certain degree, is this about not necessarily having their own policies, but having a leadership team who maybe don't implement them? Would that be the case? A lot of companies you work with.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as well, it's such a topic the government were talking about, and I'm not quite sure where they are with the right to disconnect, right? If the government are thinking about bringing that in as policy, the right to disconnect, it kind of shows you the size of the problem, really.
Yeah.
That people disconnect, and it's not good for your well-being and your mental health.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess one of the big questions is where do organisations go wrong then? Where is it a a focus thing? Is it a consistency thing, like you say? Is it that they consistently demand things that are perhaps not relevant? Is it succession planning and not having the right people in job? You mentioned that, you know, maybe you're doing two people's jobs. Is it a lack of planning that well-being is fitted into those plans? Would that be right?
I think there'll be an element of that for sure. I also think it'll be that well-being's maybe treated as like a project owned by HR, right? So, well, that's the stuff that the HR team do. They'll organise it, and leadership aren't necessarily accountable to that for that. So, you know, that sits with the people team. They'll organise initiatives, but it's a much wider problem than that. And I think as well, when businesses are downsizing, they're not necessarily saying that, well, the job doesn't need done anymore. They might say, look, well, we can stop doing that job, but in reality, the job elements of that job still need done, and therefore someone's got to do that. I think as well there'll be an element of offering things like EAP and lots of different things for mental health, which is fantastic, but too many programs like that can be quite confusing, and people go, I don't know, what one do I use? And I definitely think there's an element of lack of management training where managers actually aren't skilled in this area, and then they're almost scared to say anything in case it's the wrong thing. Especially now, I think, Claire, we've got so much protection for employees that, you know, managers are a bit worried about, well, if I said that, will I get into trouble? So yeah, I think it's a tricky environment, and that's why we need to make sure those with the responsibility are very well trained and understand that they're accountable for it. Like, people are working for these managers; they're not working for the HR team.
Yeah, it's that ownership, isn't it, at a management level, to say, I'll just pass this responsibility on to HR because, you know, it's not my job, but actually it is your job as a manager to help the person. And in terms of that, what sort of themes do you see that repeatedly come out from employees when they say they feel burnout or stressed or disengaged? What are the common things that you see in that?
So I think, you know, when people do say that I'm really stressed, I think everyone wants to help them. So if they went to the HR team or they went to the manager, you know, and their automatic thing is, let's figure this out. What can we do differently? But actually, they put a sticking plaster on it. Maybe you need some time off. You know, maybe would that help you? Or, you know, do you want to take a couple of days, or do you want to use EAP? But no one's gone back to, what is it fundamentally that's wrong in this job? What can we change in your role? So actually, even if the person takes some time out, they're coming back to the same thing, and actually they're worrying about, like, I can't go back to that because nothing's changed, because there's been no thought or consideration in the organisation side to think, does something need to change? So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, where there's a sort of lack of oversight. And for me, HR puts the framework in place, and the managers run within that framework. And I feel, you know, there needs to be a conversation that says, well, if we've got all these people who are stressed, now don't get me wrong, it could be, if it's only an odd person, then it's potentially not a job design at all. But typically we're thinking about well-being in the organisation, we just need to be certain that the jobs aren't overwhelming people, and they can get through the work. They have got the training and development to do the role. Because, I mean, you've got wellness isn't just in the workplace, right? So you've got outside, clearly, influences. You maybe get things going on at home, it's really difficult. You come into your office or your work environment, and then, you know, the same kind of pressures are there. So it's really difficult for people. I just think we're always on, and it's a really challenging scenario to be in. and actually increases absence levels. So we end up people are out of the organisation, and those that are left to pick up the pieces. So there's a higher chance that they also might go off. So yeah, I think we need to take our heads out of like the day to day and look and say what's going on in this organisation. What do we need to do differently to stop this, or put some interventions in place that are not a well-being day? What do we need to look at strategically to change in order for people not to be feeling that way? Because clearly people that are stressed are not doing their best job, right? They're just not doing their best job, and that's when mistakes happen, and then it's double the work and the person feels under even more pressure. So, you know, it's really critical that this element's addressed.
You kind of touched on a few things there in terms of the cost, and I appreciate there's a personal cost here, there's a cost to the individual in terms of their well-being. But I think, you know, we've seen a few, I don't know if this is right or not, but, you know, almost a well-being fatigue, and it's another cost to my business, and do we really need to make this? Is it not something we can get around? And, you know, how do you help leaders and companies to really understand the value? I think you almost touched on it there in terms of absence and so on, but how do you help them to see the relevance and the value of making sure there's a well-being culture at the organisation?
So I think the key things really is looking at your absence stats, looking at your turnover of people leaving your business. How much is that costing actually to backfill roles, recruit them? The gap in terms of the customer experience for your customer base, you know, that has a huge impact on your customers, whether they're going to stay with you, impacting your revenue if someone goes off and they're required to carry out a job. So I think, you know, actually saying, well, how much does that cost? And then looking at, well, how much would it cost actually if we might to hire someone else to cover, to be able to do the job properly, back to the job design, without the pressure, then I'd be willing to bet it would be significantly cheaper. So, you know, I think it's key that you understand, you have a commercial conversation with your leadership teams to say, well, this is how much it costs us in turnover and absence and unauthorised absence and whatever that is, versus how much it would cost you to look at the overall job design, making sure that that's correct and the right shape, really. And, you know, jobs change all the time. I mean, gone are the days when you had a job description where that was your job, right? Like, it's always your first aid. But anyway, so, you know, we still have role profiles and things, but, you know, they're not exactly referred to the way they were back in the day, because we've all got to be agile, can-do attitudes. And yeah, absolutely, that's essential. But we do also need to be aware that we're not hiding behind can-do attitude. Actually, it's putting people under too much pressure.
And what is the role of HR in that whole process? So, you know, the HR team's role in creating that human-centered workplace. You know, what should HR own and what should the leaders own? Where's the balance?
So I think, you know, HR can provide the data and the insights, and then support the managers really with creating the framework, policies, tools, training, so that our managers are capable, they're capable leaders that understand the responsibilities, and almost create the framework of what the wellbeing strategy is, and then for the managers to roll that out and to be accountable for the actual delivery of that. So I think, you know, it's a real partnership model. So it's working together with the managers to make sure that they know their responsibilities and the HR team are clear about their responsibilities. And it's not HR creating frameworks, thinking, well, I think this would be quite good. It's actually working with the managers and the leaders to understand what are the challenges, what challenges are you facing in your teams, and then building something as a result of that. And I think, for leaders, they need to demonstrate the correct behaviours. It should be living the values, looking at what is the workload and making sure that we're not overloading people. And I'd say early intervention. So, actually,
Right.
when you spot something, stress or conflict, because it comes out in different ways, right? So when you spot that, is really dealing with that, and having a safe environment that people feel that, well, I know if this is too much, I'm going to see my manager. It's very often not the case, and they feel like, I don't want to say anything, they'll think I can't do this, or I'm weak, or no, I'll just keep going until they can't go any longer, and they end up off sick, and it becomes incredibly hard to come back to the job.
Yeah, I think that, and again, we've had a number of podcasts now where communication, but creating a safe space for people to communicate, to talk to their manager, and to be open and honest. I think the open and honesty part of this, from both sides, is so vital, isn't it? And I think that's how you find resolution, rather than putting barriers up or assigning a cost or a value to it. It's actually about open, honest communication will help us all get to the right solution, no matter what the problem is.
And I think, there's got to be that trust, and no one wants to feel judged. And at that point in time, when you're talking about stress and mental health, you're very vulnerable. And you're not going to go to someone that's going to judge you and say, well, for goodness sake, everyone else can do it, or there's not a problem here, the problem's you. And you like to think people wouldn't do that, but they do. So, unfortunately, so then, the person feels, I can't go to them. Some other options, my GP. I'm going to have to go to my GP and get time off, and they might need medication. And actually, having managers that are appropriately trained and skilled at being managers can really take a lot of those issues away. And you say, listen, what's the problem? Let's see how we can fix this. Can I do something to help you? And even I think just being listened to can often be so helpful, because, you have been listened to, you've been taken seriously, and you don't feel that someone's judging you or sort of making derogatory comments when you're out of the room. Because that is a very vulnerable place, and I think, people in that place and their minds will have a tendency to think, will I say something? Will I not? And you just need to have that. It just needs to be safe, and this isn't about being soft. This is about putting the right environment in place so that people can talk about mental health. You'd have no problem talking about a broken arm, so you need to feel that you can talk about mental health.
I mean, I guess, looking forward, what sort of practical things could people put in place then? Even if they have a limited budget, what sort of simple practical things could they put in place to try and help create that environment?
I think for sure training managers. So I think, getting the managers skilled will be absolutely key. You're better investing in that than investing in having a wellness day, right? So I think, having clear values as well and living those values is really important. And most people's values have got trust in them somewhere. So, living those values, skilling your managers, and it doesn't have to be a big 3-day training course. It can be an intervention run by HR, educating the managers and the leadership team on what to look out for, how to handle it, who to signpost to, because we're not expecting managers to be mental health practitioners or HR. So we're saying, you won't know all the answers, but here's how to signpost people to other services that can help. And I think, those combined will definitely help. And I think things like check in with your team, whether that's like a first thing in the morning or last thing at night, or even a few days a week, just like, right, what's the workload like? What have you got on? Do you need a hand with that? Is there any blockers there? even just that quick catch up every day for 15 minutes, say, can make a massive difference, because the manager will then become aware very quickly if someone's rhyming off like 50 tasks they've got to do that day. So, I think all of that combined, it doesn't cost a lot of money to do that, because people, companies don't have budgets, they don't have like a spare pot of money to spend on this. But actually, as I said earlier, if you look at what it's costing the business, they'll be making a saving. But those sort of small practical steps, like training the managers, checking in, teaching managers and leaders where to signpost to, that combined and building an environment of trust and following your values, they still don't cost very much at all, but actually could make a massive difference and save the business a lot of money.
Brilliant. Listen, that's been fascinating. That's been really interesting discussion, and I think a lot of it does come down to, as you say, creating the right environment that's open and honest, and signposting people in the right direction. It doesn't have to be costly. It doesn't have to be overbearing. It's just about creating opportunities for people, isn't it? And it sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time, Fiona. And if people want to get in touch with you at the HR practice, do you want to give us your email address, or are you on LinkedIn as well?
So fiona.mckee@thehrpractice.co.uk. I have to say, I now regret having such a long business name. But yeah, you can get in touch with me there, or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Well, we'll put it all in the show notes. But thanks again, Fiona, and look forward to catching up again soon. Thanks for listening to the Recruitment and Beyond podcast. Hopefully there was plenty of insight for you to take back to your teams. So don't forget to subscribe and never miss an episode. And if you can, leave us a review. We really appreciate all the feedback and support we get. It makes a massive difference.